Story 8 of 30 Ghost Stories by various authors. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Sandy's Ghost. Accommodations for the night, stranger? Well, yes, I reckon we can fix a place for you. Have a chair and set you down. Thank you. Don't you find this rather a lonely place? No neighbors, no nothing that I can see. How came you to settle here, so far removed from other habitations? Well, perhaps it's best not to ask too many questions ter once. Beg your pardon? No offense was intended, I assure you, simply idle curiosity. Don't say another word, stranger, but come on in, we'll have a snack for supper. Polly, bring on some victuals. You're just in time. Polly at once obeyed. She was a typical Western girl, tall, lithe, graceful, and limpid-eyed. She was clear-skinned and high-spirited, too, and in this case ignorant through no fault of her own. John Barr's eyes scanned her intently, and a flush came to her cheeks. For the first time in her life she was unpleasantly conscious of her bare feet. It may have been this that made her stumble and spill some of the contents of an earthen bowl over the guest's knees as she placed it on the table. Her eyes flashed and a tear of anger twinkled on the lashes. She stopped, half meaning to apologize, but an oath from her father caused her to set the bowl down heavily and to hurry from the cabin. A moment later Barr saw a flutter of pink calico from behind a pile of rocks. Old Kit Robinson saw it too. Don't wonder at your sayin' 'tain't right. She's a smart gal, and a good looker too, as should have been sent away from here to school ter be eddicated. She won't leave her no 'count dad. I oughter be shot for cussin' her, but I ain't what I useter be. Settin' here and keepin' guard makes me narvous." Barr's eyes asked the question his lips refused to speak. Supper eaten, the men went outside and sat with their chairs tilted back against the cabin. Something in the younger man's frank face had softened old Kit into a reminiscent mood and made him strangely inclined to gratify an idle curiosity. The soft evening wind sighed through the branches of the tall spruce pines, and the declining rays of the setting sun caused the shadow of the rude home to stretch out longer across the greensward. From its shelter where he sat, John Barr looked out on the grand ranges of the Rockies, and wondered where in their vastness he would find the man he sought, the finding of whom had brought him into this wild and unforsaken mining camp. "Stranger, I've take a likin' ter you. You've been a somethin' about you that reminds me of some one I know, and you look like an honest chap. Say, do you believe in ghosts?" He put the question very suddenly, and a look of disappointment crossed his face when Barr told him that he did not believe in spooks. "Wall, I've seen 'em." A thought connecting the pink calico with something in the past came to Barr's mind. "Can't you tell me about it?" he asked. "I'd like ter if you'll swar on yer derringer and never ter blab. Will you swar?" The solitary guest started to smile, but the smile faded at the thought of unshed tears in Polly's eyes. It might make it easier for her if he humored the old man. "I swear," he said, and he did. "Do you see yon old spruce at the turn of the trail in the cliff jes' above? Wall, that's the spot I'm a watchin' and guardin' till the owner comes ter claim it. I'm quick ter burn powder and pretty sure shot. I know a man when I sees him, and I ain't easy fooled. Wall, ter begin with, I had a partner once, and he was a man, sure 'nuff. He was from the state of New York. I never axed him as ter how so fine a gent come ter diggin' and shovelin' in the Rockies, though ter myself I said thar was some good reason. He had light hair, and we called him Sandy, for short, and he was jes' erbout as gritty as sand. We was as unlike as any two fellers you ever saw. He was quiet like and steady, and I was sorter wild and reckless, and I liked mounting due most to well. Wall, when we had a little dust scraped together, we would divvy, and I took my share way down ter the station on the other side of the cliffs and sent her off ter the bank in Helena. But I allers left some hid whar the gal could find it. Old Sandy had a bank of his own that no one knew about, 'ceptin' himself, and every time we divided he'd carry part of it to his hidin' place, and then give the rest ter me ter send to his boy, that he said was bein' educated in some college way up in Boston. He seemed ter think a heap of that boy. Arter a while my old woman gave out, and soon we laid her away on the hillside. It was hard, stranger." Old Kit's voice failed him for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure and continued. "But when old Sandy, my good old pard, give up I didn't care for nothin'. We buried him in style. All the boys from round the diggin's was thar, and many an eye was wet. We didn't have nary a preacher, but the gal she prayed at the grave. For the life of me I don't know where she larnt it. Reckon the old women must have told her. Next mornin' the gal showed me a letter that Sandy gave her just 'fore he died. It was ter his boy, and she was ter give it ter him if he ever come out this way, and she got it yet. That same evenin' after supper, feelin' kinder gloomish, and like there was somethin' in my throat I couldn't swaller, I took a stroll up the gulch. I went on out to the top of the ridge of the big rock, and got ter studyin' where I'd find another pard like Sandy. All ter once I felt a hand touch my shoulder kind of light once or twice. I jumped up, half 'spectin' it was Sandy, but it was only the gal. Well, I was all took back at fust, and then I got mad. 'What air you doin' up here?' I axed, kinder tough. She had tears in her eyes as she looked up at me and said, 'Pap, don't git mad, I was lonesome. I seed you comin' up this way, and I follered you, 'cause I wanted to tell you that Sandy said ter give his boy his pile when he comes.' 'Wall,' says I, 'you might have waited till I come back to the house,' and then I sent her back. Arter she was gone I sot ter studyin' whar in the world Sandy's pile was. I tried ter think where he could have hid it, but it weren't no use. All ter once I noticed it was plumb dark, and these surroundings ain't a healthy place for a man to roam in arter nightfall, 'specially if he ain't got his shootin' irons on. I cut a pretty swift gait for the shack. Jest as I come around the bend thar at the pine, I happened ter look up toward the cliff, and thar sot Sandy. Yes, sir, he was him sure as you're born. My feet felt heavy as lead, and I couldn't move from the spot. I tried ter holler, but it weren't no go. Finally I gave a sudden jerk, and made a step toward him, and as I did so he disappeared. Then I made tracks for home, but I kept mum, because I knowed the boys would say that Mounting Dew was lickin' up my brains, and I would be seein' snakes and sich things 'fore long. The next night, somehow or 'nother, I thought ter go and see if he was thar again, and sure 'nuff, thar he sot, lookin' kinder sad and makin' marks on the rocks with his fingers. I had my hand on my gun this time, so I got a little closter than afore. But by hooky, he got away from me agin, nor did he come back. I could hardly wait for the next night ter come around. At the same time I was on hand good and early, jest as it begun ter git dark, and the trees looked like long spooks a stretchin' out their arms. I looked toward the cliff, and thar he sot, markin' and scratchin' on the rock with his fingers and lookin' sad. Now, this being the third time, I kinder got bolder, and I went a little closer and says, 'Sandy, what's the matter with you? Didn't the boys do the plantin' right for you?' Then as luck would have it, I thought of somethin' else right quick, and I said, 'Or is it the dust you've hid whar you're settin'?' Wall, he looked up at me then, and the happiest smile come ter his face, and all ter once he disappeared agin. And sence then I've sot here guardin' the place till the right one comes along ter claim it. Let's see, what did you say your name was?" "Pardon me, I thought I told you. My name is John Willet Barr." "Polly, oh Polly, come you here, gal. What was Sandy's full name? I plumb forgot." "What do you want ter know fur?" she asked. "I ain't goin' ter tell you now. That's my own secret." "Come, come, gal, tell me ter once or it won't be healthy fur you." "Wall, then," she answered stubbornly, "it was John Willet Barr." At her reply the young man's face grew deathly pale, and he started up from his chair, but Kit thrust him back into his seat, saying, "Bring me the letter, Polly." "What are you goin' to do with it, Pa?" she inquired cautiously. "I promised old Sandy on my oath ter keep it till the right one comes along ter claim it, and I mean ter keep my word. The right one is here, gal. Thar he sits. So trot that letter out, and don't parley long with me ef you knows when you're well off." Polly stared at the young man in utter bewilderment for a moment. Then, turning slowly, she stepped quietly into the cabin after the precious document. An unusual gleam of joy lighted up her face, and a suppressed excitement shone in her eyes. Under her breath she said, "Somehow or other, I felt he was the right one." Too truly, John Barr realized in that painful moment that whom he sought was now dead to him. That the father from whom he had been parted so many years was sleeping that long, dreamless sleep in the clay mound on the hillside, which marked his last resting place. As he turned to look at the face of old honest Kit, who had been his father's friend during those long years of forced exile, a happy smile lit up the old miner's rugged features as he pointed with his finger to the rock cliff near the old spruce vine, and said in an exultant, trembling voice, "Thar he be, stranger, jes' as I have seen him many a night, your dad, my pard, poor old Sandy." With an eager voice John Barr sprang forward, and the mountains echoed and re echoed the plaintive cry of "Father! Father!" But his outstretched arms clasped only emptiness and the darkening shadows of the rapidly approaching night. Story 9.